Hi, I'm Teresa. Welcome to Cocoon Cast, where we deep dive into movies and discuss all things cinema.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. Today we'll be doing a midweek movie review of the new movie, The Blind.
Midweek movies are a great time to take a chance on a movie you might not otherwise see. Check out your local theater for midweek bargain days. Some even have movie club memberships where you get special pricing to see multiple movies in a given week. If you're itching to see a movie and don't want to wait for the weekend, this is a great time to check out a limited release movie near you. Rebecca, tell us about the movie The Blind.
Phil Robertson has always placed his family above what he wants, but as he gets older and starts romancing Miss Kay, he realizes he wants more out of life. However, old habits creep into their relationship, and Phil realizes that if he wants to have the future he's always desired, he has to choose that outcome.
Rebecca, let's talk about why we chose this movie.
It's really weird growing up with Duck Dynasty and then realizing there's things about this family that you don't know. I just feel like they've been on TV for so long at this point.
Rebecca, let's talk about that. This is the true story of Phil Robertson, and if our cinema community is unfamiliar with Phil Robertson, he is
the patriarch of the Robertson family from Duck Commander, or you may know him from Duck Dynasty.
That I was going to say that's pretty much his claim to fame, and this is the story of his life prior to Duck Dynasty by several decades, 20, 30 years before. His three young boys were, I think the oldest was maybe about 9 or 10. And the movie starts, I found it fascinating. The movie starts when he was a young man, about 12 years old, with his brother and his two sisters. And they really started the movie talking about the mental illness of his mother.
This movie starts off in a really dark place and does not let up in terms of just the grittiness that they experience.
Well, it's one of those films where if you haven't experienced it, you feel like you've experienced it going through this. It's not overly sensationalized. It's
very raw in a lot of ways.
It is. I think raw is a good word to describe it because you really feel for this family and you really feel for his mom too. It's not, oh, poor Phil and the family. You go, boy, poor Phil and the family, but poor his mom.
That was one of the things I actually enjoyed about this movie was there was an empathetic and balanced, I want to emphasize the word balanced,
yes, perspective
on things.
Well,
nobody's a saint and nobody's perfect.
That I appreciated that too. Well, his soon-to-be wife, Kay, she comes on the picture and during church, and he's like, "Oh, she's beautiful."
Hallelujah.
Yeah, I know, right? Then the angels and the halo show. But I appreciated the fact that he talks about why she was different. He came from a very poor family, and her family was, for all intents and purposes, probably middle class, maybe upper middle class. Family owned the store. And it unfolded as it went, and her kindness. And if you've seen Duck Dynasty, or if you've read anything from her, seen anything from her, she's nothing but kind and sweet. And
she's a little rough too.
Well, and I think that's the part where you see her grit and her determination, because this movie really covers a season of Phil's life and her life, obviously, and the boys, of about a 10, 12 year period where Phil is heavily into an alcohol addiction and, having relationships outside of his wife, although I appreciate the fact that it wasn't glamorized, it wasn't graphic, but there were nods to it that was part of his life. And as you were saying, it was raw. And if you have been around anyone in an addictive state, in an active addiction, you will recognize.
There were some points where I kind of had to blink to remind myself that I'm not in that situation.
Yes.
And it was really strange because I wasn't expecting that quality of detail when it came to some of the storytelling.
I agree with
film.
that. Because the movie has a strong spiritual piece. Obviously, the Robertson family spirituality, Christianity is huge for this family. And it was the part where I think sometimes Christianity misses the opportunity to say, hey, life's not always perfect. God is good. But this was my life. This was really my life. And you think about in this season of his life, right? He's a parent, he's a grandparent, great grandparent. he could easily step back and say, oh, that was in my past. I don't really want to talk about that. But he actually used this as an opportunity to say, boy, my life has been radically changed. And I love my family. And I think that was the part from even the beginning of his love for family, his desire for family. And it makes sense why, the dynasty and why his kids are so important to him, knowing what he had gone through. And like you said, his wife, she is one strong cookie. She stepped away when they were really struggling. I know there wasn't the happily ever after right away. There was a lot of pain and drama and trauma before we even got to that point. But to me, this one was so raw and so real. Like you said, at different points you're kind of wincing. It was uncomfortable to watch. And I think that makes it more powerful, meaning the Robertsons family witness around what God can do and how God has changed them. When you see how bad it wasn't like, well, you were, kind of giving somebody a dirty look and boy, God saved you from that. It's, you were deep in an addiction. You were deep in your life. He was living in this trailer. He was living this horrible life and he had the awareness. It wasn't as if, his wife came up to him and said, hey, you're messed up. He really had to deal with his own demons, if you will.
That was the other thing I liked was it talked about how Phil's addiction was affecting his family around him.
Correct.
It wasn't focusing like, oh, let's show how awful Phil was at the expense of everyone else. It was showing how everybody else was interacting with the environment that was created by Phil's addiction.
I would agree with that. And I think it was powerful that it was gradual, meaning how he came into that. Because originally, right, he was playing college ball, wanted to provide for his wife. She had a baby really young. They were married, but, he said, oh, I feel bad for her. She was still in high school at this point. And he really wanted to provide, he's on a scholarship. Terry Bradshaw played ball with him. Apparently, Phil was the number one and Terry Bradshaw was the number two, which is, in our world now, we're like, that's interesting. But I do think you see the beginning of his choices based on from the time he was a kid and just very innocently, someone offers him a drink. He doesn't really want to take it, and they kind of push it a little bit more. He takes it. And then you just see this road and it just gradually unravels. It wasn't like you wake up one day and it's gone.
And that's not everybody's experience. But
Truly.
I appreciate the fact that they took the time to make sure you knew it was Phil's experience.
Correct. And like I said, I really respected the fact that knowing his legacy, knowing who he is and what he stands for, to be able to be that open. And his family, I know one of his sons, Willie, was one of the executive producers. Willie's wife, his daughter-in-law, was also one of the producers. And they clearly wanted this movie to be made for a reason. And to me, it didn't feel like, I know the phrase you use is a vanity project, right? Somebody's doing something for a vanity project. I'm like, this was no vanity project in my mind. This was, I want to show people, the difference of what God can do, loyalty of family, forgiveness. It's all the things I think within the Christian world that are said to be, this is how we live life. And if this is how we live life, what does that really look like? It's not just lip service.
I thought it was interesting that the Robertsons would put this out, especially given the community that they're in. These guys are like the Kennedys.
Correct. And the fact that they would say, this is who we are. We have nothing to hide. I thought, good for them, because that will help change people, I think. Do we have any questions from the box?
If someone's unfamiliar with Phil Robertson or the show Duck Dynasty, do you think they'll still find this film interesting and engaging?
I think it could be interesting as kind of like a romance story, but I think that this is primarily going to appeal with people who know who Phil is. And unfortunately, I think that's almost a disservice to the movie in some ways.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I would disagree with you some, because I think the name Robertson or Phil Robertson may, put people in the seats where people are like, oh, I want to go see that. However, I think the portrayal of, addictions, marriages on the rock, I would say that probably brings people in. However, if you can suspend that or if you don't know that, if you just go in there and go, oh, some guy, I don't know, story, guy likes ducks, right? You go in there, I think people would identify with that, or if they have someone in their family or someone in their sphere, or if that's them, to say, hey, there's hope for them. But yeah, I agree. I think the name may bring people in a little bit more. Do we have any other questions from the box?
Who do you think would enjoy this movie, and do you think it's suitable for kids that may like Duck Dynasty?
This is definitely a very, I want to emphasize, strongly different tone than the show. The show is all about hijinks, and sometimes there's some serious topics brought up in the show. This is intensely serious. So if you're bringing in a younger kid, you're going to have a lot of conversations about this. I'd say late teens.
I would say, well, maybe middle teens. And I don't think we're that far apart, so I don't want to split hairs over that. But I would agree with you. It is not a kid movie. There is, not violence, but, in his, state, he's roughs up. He's, not happy. And
He's not happy.
Happy.
He's not happy. And right, that's it. And I would just say, I don't think that would be, like you said, there would be some, it's beyond, hey, let's explain this to the kids. It's truly, they're not going to understand what's going on, and they're not going to be able to necessarily understand that, hey, Phil had a conversion experience and now he loves God. Now he's really happy, and his wife is happy with him, and his kids are happy. I mean, they would see it probably from the kids' vantage point, which would be pretty scary, I think.
It's pretty scary even if you're not a kid, because you're living somebody's life, and that life is really chaotic in some ways emotionally.
Well, and we talk about who would this movie be suited for, and I would say, and this may sound a little extreme, but I would say it could be triggering to someone who either has an addiction, someone who's recovering from an addiction, or someone who has a loved one or someone close to them who is in an addiction.
I could have definitely appreciated them talking about this a little bit more in some of the press materials. I know I definitely skipped some of it, but I would appreciate, the public being aware of that.
Right. And hopefully we don't, over dramatize it, but we just balance it enough for people to be aware that it's a strong movie. Is it a good movie? I think so. But is it a strong one? It is. Rebecca, it is that time of the show. I have 5 moths flying.
Wow.
And they're going to keep flying until you tell them where to land. 1 to 5.
Right.
What do you think on this movie?
I think this is a 3.
This is a 3. All right. Number 1 reason for a 3?
I appreciate the fact that the narrative was concise in this respect, that it's crossing 10 years. But I appreciate the fact that the narrative is concise. It's consistent. It's steady. I can follow along.
Okay. And typical Tina, average Anthony?
I think the typical Tina, average Anthony, if you want to watch kind of a romantic movie, this is a good option.
Well, and I find it funny because I'm talking about, the addiction and, the whole salvation piece. And you're like, it's a romantic movie.
It is. I think it can be very romantic. I remember watching romantic movies with my grandma growing up.
Yeah, right.
And this follows a very similar structure. So I think the faith-based audience isn't the only audience this can hit.
Which I think would be great. And I think they would probably be happy to say, hey, we made this for beyond the faith-based community. But I just laugh because you're like the romantic piece. And I think that's a good notice that there is some romantic pieces. There is some real love and affection that is taking place. So I appreciate you bringing that out. And think it's worth a watch?
I think that if you're in those two audiences, the Duck Dynasty super fans and the romance genre people, I think it's worth a watch. It's a midweek movie review for a reason. It's not the best movie I've ever seen, but it's something enjoyable.
Well, and it is limited release, which is the other part. It's not wide release. I'm not sure if it will go wide release. So yeah, I would say for me, it's probably 3 and a wing. So it is above average. The acting I felt was good. Like you said, it told the story. It told the story well. And the fact that there was so much realism, I just think it made it so much more impactful in my mind. And as you said, the pacing, I think, was also really, really good. To me, it is worth a watch. It is worth midweek possibly, on the weekends if you have time. I know it's important to stay for the post-credit scenes. There are some pictures if you like the Phil Robertson family or the Robertson family. You'll enjoy the pictures. There are some little factual data. I also know there's an organization, it's called I Am Second, and maybe some people in our cinema community may be familiar with them. They're like small little tidbits of people's lives and how their lives have changed over the course of time, and obviously the piece that God plays in their life, just like the Robertson family. But if you go to the website, you can access a discussion guide, like for a small group, or if you want to talk with your family, which I appreciated. So it's not just, hey, here's the movie. It's here's some good discussion points that may be valuable to you. Thanks for joining us for this midweek review. We're always excited to create experiences to bring our cinema community together.
Watch the notifications for our review of the new movie, The Kill Room. Then come back to the channel this Saturday for our weekly show, Movies and More, where we will have more movie reviews, the latest Hollywood news, and commentary with snark meant to amuse.
Please like and subscribe and share our channel.
If you enjoyed this midweek review, you might click the link to check out a review of The Creator, or click the other link to see another movie review about families, My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3.
Remember, cinema community movies are better together.